Hello students. So today we will be starting off with a new chapter, that is chapter 2, accounting for special transactions, and this particular chapter is also comprised of section A. So section A has two chapters, that is chapter 1 and chapter 2, and the weightage that has been given to both these chapters is around 20 to 25 marks. And so as we discussed about the first chapter, that around 10 to 15 marks of the paper comes from that chapter. So we are left with around 10 marks of this of the paper, which will be covered from this particular chapter. So this is an important and an easy chapter, and thus if you concentrate and practice well the questions and the concepts of this particular chapters, you can easily score those 10 marks which would be covered from this particular chapter. Looking at the chapter overview, the types of accounting and the accounting for the special transactions. So the special transactions that we will be covering in this chapter would be bills of exchange. So we would be looking at what is a bill of exchange, and then how is consignment accounting done in the books of accounts, joint venture accounts, how we prepare joint venture accounts, and lastly insurance claim. So all four of these transactions are important, and as terms of the coverage in the paper, you would definitely get questions. Questions can be asked from anywhere and from any particular topic of a chapter. However, if you analyze the papers, you will see that you often get questions related to insurance claim. It is not that consignment accounting, joint venture account, and bills of exchange is not being asked in the paper, but all these four topics are important. But if you analyze and see the pattern, then you would find that questions related to insurance claim are more often asked. So now starting with the first topic or first accounting transaction that we would be taking a look at is bills of exchange. So in the bills of exchange itself, we would be taking a look at a number of accounting concepts related to bills of exchange. So first and foremost, we will be taking a look at meaning of the bills of exchange. Then what are the features of a bill of exchange? So we would be looking at the meaning of the bill of exchange, in which we will be covering that bills of exchange is a medium and of a negotiable instrument. Then what parties are involved in that particular in a bill of exchange. Then due date of calculation and date of maturity, acceptance of bill, discounting of a bill, dishonor of a bill, renewal, how a bill can be renewed, then when is the retirement considered, and what are the accounting entries involved in the bills of exchange, what are the types of bills of exchange, what are the discounting charges, treatment of such discounts in the books, insolvency by the drawee, operating cycle of the accommodation bill. Now starting with the bills of exchange topic, and so now business transactions can be settled either in cash or in credit. So as we all know that a business transaction is a transaction that involves exchange of money, and that exchange of money happens when the goods are being procured or goods are being sold and thus helps in generating revenue for the business. Now such transactions, because it involves money, and such money can either be settled in cash or in credit. So cash is immediate payment, and credit refers to financial obligation that is created, financial obligation that is created on the person who has procured the goods. So that financial obligation means that the goods have been procured, however the payment can be made on a later date. Now most of the settlements are not on cash basis. So if in the business you compare that the credit transactions with the cash transactions of a business, you will find out that the frequency of a credit transaction would be more, as the business owner would want to have the transaction settled in credit, as this will help in preserving the liquidity mode also of the business, and the cash that is available could be used for other purposes rather than making a payment, and payment could be made at a later date. So, which is why we say that most of the settlements are not on cash basis but on credit basis. And so the credit transactions, and what are the credit transactions that we're talking about? So such transactions are those where payment for goods and services is deferred at the behest of both the parties to the transaction. So nowadays we, on our daily basis, or in the routine nature also, we all have conducted once or even more than once a credit transaction, as everybody these days prefer to buy it, buy a particular good that involves a considerable amount of money. Like for instance, if you're purchasing a particular machinery or a laptop for yourself, and so it is worth somewhere around 50 to 60,000. So instead of paying instead of paying the whole amount in cash, one would prefer to split the amount into the subsequent months and then pay it in installments. So that is what is a credit transaction that we are talking about. So credit transactions are those transactions where payment for goods and services is deferred. So for instance, you've purchased a mobile phone or a laptop which is worth rupees 60,000, and instead of paying 60,000 directly on purchase, 60,000 directly in cash on purchase, so this would be the cash mode of payment or the cash basis. And in case of the credit transaction, what will happen is this 60,000 is divided by divided in 12 installments, and thus you pay to the buyer in such installments. And so this is basically at the behest of both parties. When we mean that both the parties agree to such a transaction, and the person who is purchasing is paying the sum in the installment, however procuring that particular good at that very moment of sale. So this is the benefit that is available to the person who is procuring or buying that particular good. And the advantage which is available with the seller is that the sale is being made, and the amount would be recognized. However, this increases the frequency and the chances of the sale being made if the seller keeps an option of a credit as well as a cash transaction. So one who can pay the cash immediately and buy the product would do that. And adding a credit mode of transaction would also impact the sales, because there are people who will buy the product, however would prefer to make the payment at a later date or make the payment in installments. So thus such transactions are where the payment for the goods or the service is deferred at the behest of both the parties, and such deferred payments are done through instruments. So now, what is the security, and how does the seller ensure that the goods that have been sold to a particular buyer, and how can the seller ensure that he will receive the complete amount of that particular product sold? So such deferred payments are thus done through instruments like checks, pay order, letter of credit, promissory note, bills of exchange, and hundis, which were more popular in the ancient times. So these are some of the instruments through which a credit transaction takes place, and amongst those is one of the instrument that we are going to study in detail, which is bills of exchange. And as these instruments facilitate credit transaction, they can be thus referred to as credit instruments or negotiable instruments. So thus here we determine the nature of the bills of exchange, that is a negotiable. So we can refer a bill of exchange as a negotiable instrument or a credit instrument. So moving further, now the supplier normally gets a promise from the customer. So what happens in the credit transaction at the initial stage, the supplier will get a promise from the customer that he will be settling the payment at a future date as agreed. And it could either be a promissory note or a bill of exchange. So like in the case of credit mode, what is done is, so if that particular transaction happens, and what is the certainty with the supplier that the supplier is going to receive the entire amount of the goods that have been sold to a particular customer. So in the case of bills of exchange, what happens is that the customer gives a promise to the supplier and gives a date that on that particular date he will be settling the entire amount of the goods that have been procured by him, and such date is being recorded or is being in a written form. It is being authenticated, and it could either be a promissory, it could be regarded either as a promissory note or a bill of exchange. So basically, what is a bill of exchange? It is a promise committed by the customer to the supplier that on an agreed date he will be paying the entire sum of the money for which the goods have been procured by the customer. And so again, as per the Negotiable Instruments Act, so in the Negotiable Instruments Act, bills of exchange has been defined as an instrument in writing. So thus this makes it a makes a record of the purchase being done, and that record is, so that particular instrument is thus signed by the seller and the buyer, and thus authenticating the purchase. And also this instrument in writing contains an unconditional order signed by the maker directing a certain person to pay a certain sum of money only to the order of the certain person or to the bearer of the instrument. So thus basically this instrument can also be referred to as, a documented proof that such sale has taken place, firstly. And secondly, if we say that the second authentication that happens with this particular instrument in writing is that the customer on an agreed date which has been mentioned in this particular instrument is bound, on an agreed date, is bound to make the full settlement, for the goods procured. Goods procured from the seller. And also the name of the owner, or the one who has the name of the buyer, the name of the seller is specifically mentioned, that the amount that is to be settled is to be paid back to the owner of such goods, who is to be paid back to the seller only, and that person is the name and the identity of that person is specifically mentioned in the bill of exchange. So now, after looking at the definition, let us quickly take a look at the features of bills of exchange. So basically, first and foremost, it is a written record, or it is an instrument in writing. It contains an unconditional order of that basically the customer is bound to make full settlement of the products that have been procured from the buyer, and such sum that is due is to be paid to the buyer only. Then it is signed by the drawer, and it is drawn on a specific person. So drawn on a specific person, as to we are referring to, the only two people who would be a part of this instrument would be the buyer and the seller. so that it could be easily determined that who owes money to whom and who is going to make the settlement and where to make that particular settlement. So apart from the two people which are mentioned in the bills of exchange, no other person is will be making the payment or to whom the payment is going to be made. The payment has to be made from the buyer to the seller only. And again, it is in order to pay a specific sum of money. So the money involved or the payment which is due from the buyer to the seller should be mentioned also in this particular bill of exchange. And again, it must be dated, and it also should be mentioned and it also should have the specific date on which the amount needs to be paid back to the seller. And it specifies, so it is important that it specifies to whom the payment is to be made in order to avoid any confusion at the date of the payment. And again, the amount of money to be paid must also be specified, or it must also be certain in order to avoid any confusions on the date of the payment. It must be properly stamped, which will help or which will thus prove the authentication of the document. All right, and it may be made payable on demand or after a definite period of time. So it is not that the bill of exchange should have a specific date that this particular payment has to be made at this date only, and after that or before that the payment cannot be made. So it all depends on the mutual agreement between the buyer and the seller. They can prefer, or they can make design the instrument in a way that such instrument or such order becomes payable on demand only, or they can also mention a definite period of time within which that particular settlement of the amount needs to be done. Now, the important note here is that whereas a bill of exchange is drawn by seller and accepted by the buyer, a promissory note, on the other hand, is created by the buyer as an undertaking to pay to the seller. So this is basically a differentiation between a bill of exchange and a promissory note, and the differentiating point is that in the case of bills of exchange, the bill of exchange is drawn by the seller and it is thus accepted by the buyer. However, in the case of promissory note, the promissory note is created by the buyer, so the promise is being made by the buyer as an undertaking to pay to the seller. Whereas in the case of bill of exchange, the seller draws this particular negotiable instrument, and that particular instrument is thus accepted and signed off by the buyer. Now, looking at the parties that are involved in a bill of exchange. So first and foremost, the parties involved in the transaction. Now, the parties involved in the transaction that uses bill of exchange as a mode of settlement are drawer. He is a person, so drawer, who is a drawer? He is a person who draws the bill, typically the seller or the creditor. So like we just read about it, that in the case of bill of exchange, the drawer, as in the seller of the goods particularly draws this bill of exchange and thus referred to as a drawer in the case of bill of exchange. And drawee will be the person on whom such bill is drawn by the seller. So normally he is the buyer or the debtor, and he has to pay the amount of the bill to the drawer. So drawee basically is the buyer and drawer basically is the seller. So that is how you can learn and as well as understand when we are specifically mentioning a drawer, that means it is we are talking about the seller, and when we are mentioning drawee of a bill of exchange, we are particularly talking about the buyer of such goods or services. Now, payee, he is the person to whom the amount of bill is payable. Again, payee and seller, such terms can be mutually exchanged, as it means the same, as because the person to whom the amount of bill is payable, he may be the drawer himself, or it could be the creditor of the drawer. So mostly in the cases, the payee and the drawer are same. However, in certain circumstances, payee could be the creditor of the drawer also. And then endorsee, so he is the person in whose favor the bill is endorsed by the drawer, and he is usually the creditor of the drawer. So here we are defining basically what do we mean by creditor of the drawer. So creditor of the drawer, also called as the endorsee, so he is the person in whose favor the bill is endorsed by the drawer. So basically we have we refer to people as we've talked about buyer as well as the seller, and then the seller has the right to assign the creditor of that particular seller as an endorsee or as a payee to whom such amount of the bill is becomes payable. So that can be done on the discretion of the drawer himself. And drawee in case of need, so sometimes the name of another person is mentioned as the person who will accept the bill if the original drawee does not accept it, and such a person is called the drawee in case of need. So in case there is a situation wherein, or probably to in order to cover the risks and cover the contingencies, so sometimes the name of other person is also mentioned as the person in case the original drawee refuses to accept that particular bill. So then in that case, so for instance, in the case of when you buy a loan or when you take a loan, you give your references so that in case the person who has taken the loan, in case that person disappears or fails to make the payment, so the one who is referring or who is taking the guarantee of the particular person thus becomes liable in that particular situation and has to pay off the loan of the person who has failed to pay the loan and who has initially taken the loan but has now failed to pay their loan. And similarly, in the case of drawee, in case of need, the initial drawer or the original drawee, once that particular drawee does not accept the bill of exchange, in that case, drawee in case of need becomes the original drawee and is bound to make the payment that is being mentioned in the bill of exchange. So how do we calculate and ascertain the due date on a bill of exchange? So now the date on which the amount of bill becomes payable. So what exactly is a due date or a date of maturity? So due date is the date on which the amount of the bill becomes payable, and thus it would be either called as a due date or the date of maturity. And the period between the date of drawing the bill and the due date is called the tenure of the bill. So for instance, I purchased a good today, purchased a good today, that is, and so that could be 1st of February, and I have a credit, or the due date of maturity is, or the due date is after 3 months. So so basically it has been agreed on the bill of exchange that the payment of this good would be paid after or within this particular period. So from 1st Feb it would be March, April and May. So by 1st of May I have to make the payment. So between the period, so we are talking about the tenure of the bill, so the period between 1st of Feb to 1st of May, so the period between 1st of Feb to 1st of May becomes the tenure of the bill. And how do we compute the due date? In order to compute due date, we will also include 3 days which are called the grace period, and such grace period is included to the date of maturity of the period of the bill. So basically, along with those 3 months, we would be adding 3 days grace period to the date of maturity up till the period of the bill. So like in the case of this particular example, we purchased the goods of 3 on 1st of February. Due date is after 3 months. So 1st May plus 3 days, that means 2nd, 3rd and 4th. So 4th of May becomes the due date of maturity. So now the date of maturity of the period of bills depends on whether the bill is payable on date or the bill is payable on site. So two ways of looking at and deciding on what is the date of maturity of a bill of exchange is that in case the bill is payable on date, the due date will be different, and in case the bill is payable on site, the due date calculation will be different. So in case the bill is payable on date, the date of maturity is computed by including the tenure of the bill to the making of the bill. So in case the bill is payable on date, we have to include the tenure of the bill to the date of maturity, and so the date of maturity will be thus calculated or computed by including tenure of the bill to the making of the bill. And this would be more clear with the example that we are going to take. And so here date of maturity can be understood by so this is how we ascertain the date of maturity. Let us take a look at the following example. Now date of drawing is 12th of December 2012 and the tenure is 3 months. So thus the date of maturity comes out to be 12 March 2013. However, if the bill becomes due at site, the date of maturity is counted by including tenure of the bill. So the only thing, the thing that you have to keep in mind is that in case the bill is payable on date, the due date has to be calculated on the date of drawing plus the tenure. However, in case of the bill which becomes due at site, the date of maturity is counted by including tenure of the bill to the date of accept. So in case a question is specifically mentioned that bill is payable on date, then the date of maturity has to be calculated by adding the tenure towards the date of drawing. And in case the bill is mentioned that bill becomes due at site, so how do we calculate the date of maturity? In the tenure of the bill, we include the date. So in the date of acceptance, we will be adding on the tenure and thus deriving the maturity or the due date of that particular bill. So for the bill which is payable on date, the due date after including the grace period, so which is plus 3 days, becomes 15th of March 2013. And in the case of bill when becoming due at site, so the date the due date of bill after including the grace period for that particular bill that we just so when the bill is payable, so this particular due date is when the bill becomes payable on date. And when it is due at site or bill is payable, so bill is payable at date, then when if the bill is payable at site, the grace period or the due date would be 16 plus 3 days, that is 19th of March 2013, right? So this is how we calculate the due date of a bill of exchange. And now what is the date of maturity? So in order to compute the date of maturity, the following points should be noted. So first and foremost, days of grace are allowed on bills payable on maturity of a fixed period, and in case of bills that are payable on demand, amount is required to be paid on presentation, and therefore there is no grace period that is allowed. So in case there are some bills of exchange which are payable on maturity of a fixed period, so if there is a fixed period, then days of grace needs to be allowed on that particular bill of exchange. That for instance, like we did in the previous examples, that there were 3 months that were pre-decided that with after the end of this particular tenure the payment has to be made, and with this in that particular case we can assign days of grace. So such days could be 2 days or 3 days of grace period can be allowed. However, so in case of the bills which are payable on demand, in that case amount is required to be presented on that particular date or on the demand date itself, and no grace period should be allowed. And if the period of the bill matures on a date which is not there in the month in question, then the due date is taken as the last date of the month. So now how do we ensure the date of maturity? So in case if the period of the bill matures on a date which is not there in the month, so for instance in the February month we have mentioned, or so the bill becomes due in February, and we have mentioned the date as of 30th of the month. So 30th does not come in that particular month. So how do we ascertain the date of maturity for that particular month? Then the due date is taken as the last date of the month, which becomes 28th of February in case of the example we just took. So another example that is mentioned out here is that, for example, if a bill is drawn on 31st of January 2013 and the period of the bill is 3 months. So if we see the 31st of January, then the 28th of February, then we have 31st of March, and then we have 31st of April, which will not be the case. So thus the bill will become payable on the last date of the month, which is 30th of the April. And after this 30th of April, after considering last date of the month as the ending of the tenure of the bill, we will be adding 3 days as the grace days, and then the due date will thus be calculated as 3rd of May. So you have to keep in mind that the last date of the month needs to be considered in case the bill matures on a date which is not there in that particular month. So 31, 30, 28, all these things have to be taken care of, and you do not have to go by the days, rather you will have to go by the period. That if it says third month, so if that particular month is ending on 31st, then it would be the 31st of the month. If the period of the month is ending on 30th, or in the case of February, 28th, so last date of the month would be considered as the ending of the tenure of that particular bill. Now coming to the third point, which says that in case the expiry date of a bill falls on a holiday, the bill will become payable on the preceding day, but when the maturity date is a bank holiday or a Sunday and the second day of grace is also a holiday, the bill is payable on the next working day. So all such points needs to be kept in mind while you are ascertaining the date of maturity. And so this is a simple point which says that in case of holiday, we would ascertain the payable date as the preceding day. However, if the maturity date is a bank holiday or a Sunday and the second day of grace period is also a holiday, so both these conditions should be applicable. In that case only the bill will be payable on the next working day. Now the tenure of the bill can be explained in months or in days, and the due date of the bill should be computed considering this fact in mind. So we have to see in the question specifically that the tenure of the bill, whether it is being specified in months or it is being asked or specified in days, and accordingly we will be ascertaining the due date of the bill, keeping such fact in mind. So if we are mentioning 3 months, so we will be taking the tenure or considering the tenure by the month cycle, and in case we are mentioning the days, then we would be computing the exact days as to the tenure while ascertaining the tenure of the bill or while ascertaining the due date of maturity. So now coming to acceptance of a bill of exchange, and how does a bill of exchange is accepted, and then who accepts it, and what are the conditions involved in acceptance of a bill of exchange. So when the drawee puts his signature across the face of a bill of exchange with or without the words accepted, it is called acceptance. So when does a bill of exchange considered to be accepted? When the drawee puts the signature across the face of a bill of exchange. So for instance, we have this is our bill of exchange, and when the drawee puts his signature across the here, if the drawee has put his signature all across the face of the bill with or without the word accepted, it would be still be called. So even though it has only been crossed by across the face of the bill, the signature has been put forward and the word accepted has not been written, still this would be considered as an acceptance of the bill of exchange. A bill would require, whether a bill requires acceptance or it does not require, as because the bill of exchange, as we have all seen in the features of the bill of exchange, that the date is specifically mentioned, who is going to pay such amount and to whom and on what particular date, everything is mentioned in that particular bill of exchange. So whether we need to or whether the drawee needs to accept a bill of exchange or not comes the question. So in that case, a bill, except in certain special cases, requires acceptance. So it is essential that the drawee accepts such a bill of exchange in order to confirm, in order to give this confirmation to the drawer that such amount will be paid by the drawee, and otherwise the liability of the drawee cannot be thus established. So without acceptance of a particular bill of exchange, how can one guarantee, or how can the seller be confident that such an amount would be received by the drawee? So in order to establish that yes, that particular drawee is liable to pay the drawer certain amount of money, acceptance of a bill of exchange thus becomes important. And acceptance can be, so there are two ways of accepting a bill of exchange. One could be journal and the other could be qualified. So when the drawee accepts the liability to pay the amount mentioned in the bill in full without any condition or limitation, it is called a general acceptance. So in the case where the drawee completely accepts the condition that he has to pay the amount in full and there are no limitations from the end of the drawee, and simply agrees to pay that particular amount which is due at the date of maturity, so that acceptance would be termed as a general acceptance. And what is a qualified acceptance? So with the word only, it implies condition put in by the drawee. So when the drawee accepts subject to some qualification as regards to the amount, tenor or domicile, so it could be any condition put forward by the drawee while payment of that particular bill of exchange. If the drawee accepts the that particular bill of exchange and puts some condition on the payment, or it could be on the tenor or tenure of the bill, or it could be for any particular reason, such an acceptance would be termed as a qualified acceptance. So an acceptance without any condition would be termed as general acceptance, and an acceptance by the drawee with some qualification would be termed as a qualified acceptance. So looking at discounting a bill, so how can one, or whether a drawer can discount a bill of exchange or not? So if the holder of a bill wants to get the money of the bill, so now bill of exchange is what? It is an order, an unconditional order, which will make the drawee liable to pay the drawer the amount of money in terms of or in exchange of the goods that have been procured by the drawee. However, in case where the drawer wants to have some available cash with him or is in need of the money, the holder can always opt for discounting a bill option to get the cash immediately available, to get cash immediately available. However, discounting a bill has its own conditions and limitations. If the holder of the bill wants to get the money of the bill before its due date, he can do so by selling the bill to a bank or a discounting house. So not only to a bank, there are discounting houses who will take this particular bill of exchange with in consideration of a charge which is called as a discount. So, and thus provide him with the ready cash. So for instance, that bill of exchange has an amount that will be paid on the end of the maturity as rupees 1 lakh, and such bill of exchange is thus sold by the drawer or holder of the bill to the bank or a discounting house. So what will a bank or a discounting house do? In consideration of a charge that is called discount, they will provide the ready cash. So they will put a percentage of discount which is termed as a charge that they are levying it on the charge they are levying on this particular bill of exchange, which would be the basically the profit or advantage to that particular bank that they are providing. So which could be termed as the commission of the bank or the discounting house, that they are providing the readily available cash to the holder of the bill. So thus they will charge a percentage or as a discount, which would be a form of income for that particular bank or the discounting house. So thus this particular or this nature of providing cash instead, a readily available cash instead of the bill of exchange, is known as discounting of this bill. So discounting is basically the commission or the charge that is levied by the bank or the discounting house. And thus the discount which is charged by the bank, so as we said, discount which is charged by the bank is the interest at a certain rate percent per annum on the amount of the bill for its unexpired period. So for instance, like we said that this 1 lakh is the amount of the bill of exchange, and when the holder sells it to the bank, the unexpired period is around 2 months of that particular bill. So on the basis of that unexpired period, at a certain percentage, interest will be charged by the bank from the holder once this particular bill is sold to the bank or the discounting house. And the period from the date of discounting up to the date of, so how do we calculate the unexpired how do we calculate the unexpired period? The period from the date of discounting up to the date of maturity. And again, so this discount has no connection with any cash discount in so the cash discount or the trade discount. This discount is so the name is discounting a bill. However, the nature is that it is a percentage or a charge that is levied on the holder by the bank or the discounting house and the nature is that a certain percentage of interest is charged on the unexpired period of the bill, and such charge is levied on the holder of the bill, and after deducting that particular charge from the amount of the bill, the readily available cash is provided to the holder of the bill. So this is an important point, that such discounting of a bill should not be confused with any cash discount and thus not be related to it, as that is not a discount that we are talking about. That is a charge that the bank is levying on the holder of the bill in exchange of providing the cash that is required by the holder of a bill or the drawer of that particular bill. So this completes the lecture here. We will be continuing the remaining topics of the bill of exchange and doing the illustrations in the next lecture. So till then, take care.